a ghost in Connecticut, shadows of the forgotten. In the heart of Southington, Connecticut, where leafy forests and gray skies wrap the visitor in an atmosphere of eternal melancholy, a house rises that seems to have been torn from a nightmare of the 19th century. His wooden facade blackened by time, with windows that seem blind eyes watching the world, has witnessed as old as death itself. For the Snedeker family, this house was the last hope, a place where his teenage son, Matthew, could receive treatment against cancer in a nearby hospital, far from the bustle and stress of the city. But what they didn't know was that the house was not empty. A legacy of suffering, dark rituals and presences that had never abandoned those walls patiently waited for new tenants to cross their threshold. From the first moment, the house transmitted a sense of restlessness. The air smelled of moisture and something else, a metallic aroma like dry blood, which seemed to permeate the walls. The rooms with high roofs and crispy soils seemed to whisper inaudible words when the sunlight disappeared. The Snedeker, however, tried to ignore those signs. Matthew's disease was his priority, and anything that seemed supernatural was attributed to stress and fatigue. But soon, the events began to overcome any rational explanation. Matthew, a 16-year-old boy whose face had lost color due to chemotherapy, began to have vivid dreams of hooded figures that dragged him to a crypt under the house. His mother, Janet, found strange marks on the walls of the basement, symbols that seemed to belong to a hidden language. The father, Alan, a pragmatic and skeptical man, noticed how his behavior changed. He became irritable, even violent, as if something or someone manipulated his emotions. The lights flashed for no apparent reason, the doors closed alone, and a glacial cold invaded the rooms, even in the middle of summer. The house, discovered later, had been a funeral in the 19th century, owned by a man named Dr. Henry M. Halloran. This, according to historical documents, was known for its unconventional medical practices and its interest in occultism. It was rumored that he performed illegal autopsies and that he participated in satanic rituals with still hot bodies. When he died, the funeral home was abandoned, but the spirits he had invoked never departed. The house became a place of passage for lost souls, trapped between life and death, fed by the pain and suffering of those who inhabited it. The Snedeker were not the first to experience these phenomena. In the 70s, a family that had lived there denounced demonic possessions and physical attacks by a presence called the Guardian. They were never believed. The story was repeated with the Snedeker. His help calls were received with skepticism, even by friends and neighbors. Until, desperate, they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, the most famous demonologists in the United States, whose work inspired films such as The Conjuring. The Warren arrived in Connecticut with their research team and unwavering faith in the power of light against darkness. What they found in the house left them horrified. Negative energies were so intense that even religious objects, as blessed crosses and reliquaries, refused to work. The house, according to Lorraine, was a portal between worlds, a place where demons and dark spirits fed from the vital energy of the living. Matthew, especially vulnerable for his illness, was the main objective. The book explores not only supernatural events, but also human psychology under extreme pressure. How does a family resist the possession of its members? What happens when faith collides with the inexplicable? Through testimonies, historical documents, and interviews with experts, Shadows of the Forgotten unravels the mysteries of one of the most shocking horror stories of the 20th century. Each chapter is an immersion in the dark, a trip to the limits of reality and fear. Chapter 1. Moving, a new beginning in an old house. The Snedeker truck stopped in front of the house at sunset. The sky, dyed orange and purple, looked like an open wound on the wooden roof. Alan, the father, went down first, with his face tired but determined. Behind him, Janet, his wife, observed the facade with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Matthew, sitting at the back, barely looked up. His hair, scarce after months of chemotherapy, was hidden under a baseball cap. "Are you sure it's here?" Janet asked, adjusting the seat belt. Alan nodded, although his voice trembled in responding. "The real estate agent said she was perfect for us. Near the hospital, spacious. But so old that it looks like a horror movie decoration," Matthew interrupted with a forced smile. The house was, indeed, imposing. Built in 1880, it had 3 floors of dark wood, elongated windows with red-stained glass windows, and a 2-waters roof that was curved up at the ends, as if trying to touch the sky. A large porch surrounded the main facade, with turned columns that supported the roof. What caught the most attention was a cylindrical tower in the northwest corner, with a circular window that looked like a giant eye watching the property. Inside, the air was loaded with dust and moisture. The walls, covered by discolored, painted papers, showed mold spots. The wooden floor creaks under each step. Despite the wear, there were details that suggested a luxury past: moldings on the roof, a snail staircase in the lobby, and a kitchen with carved oak cabinets. "We can fix it," Janet said, trying to be optimistic. Alan did not respond. His gaze had been fixed at a door at the end of the lobby, semi-raised, from which a cold air came out that did not match the outer temperature. "And that door?" asked. "Be the basement," Janet replied. "The agent said there is a very large basement." Matthew, meanwhile, climbed the stairs slowly, leaning on the railing. On the first floor, he found 3 rooms. The bottom had a window that gave the forest. When looking out, he saw a standing figure among the trees. He was a tall man, dressed in old clothes, black hat, and pale face. Matthew blinked, and the figure disappeared. "Hello?" he murmured, in a trembling voice. Below, Alan decided to open the basement door. The wood was wet and heavy, and when pushing it, a smell of wet ground and death hit him. The stairs descended towards the dark. He turned on a flashlight and went down, ignoring the chill that tore at his back. In the basement, he found stone walls, a wooden beam roof, and a marble table in the center. On it, there were marks of dry blood, although the marble was clean. In a corner, a rusty iron closet. When opening it, he found old surgical tools, scalpels, mountains, and tweezers with spots that looked like blood. "What the devil?" Alan whispered, going back. Above, Janet and Matthew finished unpacking. The mother noticed that Matthew was pale. "Are you okay?" asked. "Yes, I'm only cold." Janet touched his forehead, but had no fever. Then they heard a noise in the basement, a dry blow as if something had fallen to the ground. Alan rapidly rose, with his face disheveled. "It's not a normal house," he said. "It is a funeral." "That? There is an autopsy table. And tools, as if someone had worked with bodies." The word bodies was suspended in the air. Matthew, at that time, felt a pressure in his chest, as if something invisible were watching him. That night, Matthew had his first dream. It was in a dark room with black candles that illuminated walls covered with symbols. A hooded man approached him, holding a knife. "I need you," the figure whispered. "Your blood will open the door." Matthew woke up screaming. The Snedeker, without knowing it, had crossed the threshold of a hell that had been waiting for them for decades. And the house, patient, began to claim what was his. Chapter 2. The Dark Secret of the House. The next morning was tense. Alan hadn't slept well. Repeated, during the night, he heard steps on the roof and whispers on the walls. At 6 a.m., he got up with the determination to find out the truth about the house. Janet, although tired, prepared breakfast, while Matthew stayed in his room, clinging to his blanket with his eyes lost on the roof. "What's wrong with you, honey?" Janet asked when he entered. Matthew did not respond. His breathing was fast, almost as if he had a panic attack. At that time, the warehouse wall clock marked 6:15 a.m. And, suddenly, the sound of the pendulum stopped. A sepulchral silence invaded the house. "It's not normal," Matthew murmured, in a hoarse voice. "It is not normal." Alan, meanwhile, reviewed documents in the laptop. The real estate agent had given them few details about the property, but the name of the previous owner, a man named Thomas Riley, appeared in the cadastral records. Alan introduced the name into a search engine and, after several searches, found a 1986 newspaper article entitled, "Family Denounces Demonic Possessions in a Southington House, Madness or Supernatural Phenomenon?" The article reported how, in 1978, the Riley family, parents, and 2 children, had moved home, convinced of having found an ideal home. However, in a matter of weeks, the children began to have inexplicable seizures, and the mother, Eleanor Riley, claimed to have been attacked by a black figure in her bedroom. The family left the house after the 12-year-old youngest tried to commit suicide after witnessing a black mass in the basement. The authorities brought them down as hysterics, and the case was filed. Alan closed the laptop with a chill. It could not be a coincidence. The house had a history, and now they were there. The shadows of the past. Janet, on the other hand, decided to investigate the house in search of answers. He checked the kitchen drawers, lobby cabinets, and room shelves. In a wooden box in the attic, he found an old photo album with blurred images of men dressed in dark suits and cup hats surrounding a marble table in the basement. In one of the photos, a man with beard and cold eyes looked directly at the camera. Under the photo, in calligraphic lyrics, someone had written, "Dr. Henry M. Halloran, Funeraria Halloran, Southington, 1892. Janet felt a chill. The house had been a funeral. But not anyone. Stirring more, he found a record book with Latin annotations and symbols that seemed to belong to a hidden language. The pages were full of dead names, but at the end of the book there was a list of dates and enigmatic phrases. March 17, 1895, the door opens. The first one wakes up. January 14, 1897, the ritual of silence. Pure blood is the key. December 22, 1899, the guardian wakes up. The house is yours. Janet closed the book with force, his accelerated pulse. It could not be a coincidence. The house had not only been a funeral. It was a place of satanic rituals. The awakening of the spirits. That same afternoon, Matthew decided to explore the basement. Despite the insistence of his parents not to go down alone, something called him. When opening the door, a glacial cold hit him. The stairs browned under their feet. Upon arriving down, the light turned on, but the bulbs blinked, as if they resisted illuminating the space. In the middle of the basement, the autopsy table was still there, with dark spots that looked dry. Matthew approached slowly, as if he were in trance. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him. "Do you want to know the truth?" Matthew turned, but there was no one. The voice was masculine, serious, with a sweet tone that hypnotized it. "Who are you?" he asked, in a trembling voice. "I'm the guardian. The house is mine. And you are my chosen." Matthew felt acute chest pain, as if something invisible were going through it. He fell to his knees, shouting with pain. Outside the basement, Janet and Alan heard the screams and ran towards him. When they found him, Matthew was unconscious, with red marks on his chest, as if they had tried to tear his heart. The connection with the spirits. During the following days, the phenomena intensified. Alan began to have episodes of anger for no apparent reason. He attacked Janet on one occasion, accusing her of having brought demons to the house. Janet, terrified, called a friend who worked in a local museum, specialized in Connecticut history. He provided information about the funeral Halloran and its illegal practices. According to the records, Dr. Halloran had been accused in 1898 of desecrated corpses and perform unauthorized medical experiments. In addition, it was rumored that he was a member of a secret society called the Order of the Eternal Night, dedicated to the cult of old entities. "It's not just a house," Janet explained Alan. "It is a place of power." Dr. Halloran used the bodies to open a door, something that called the guardian. Alan, although skeptical, could not deny what was happening. Matthew still had vivid dreams, where he saw hooded figures performing rituals with corpses. In one of them, a female figure cried in a corner, with hands tied with iron chains. He was one of his victims, Matthew said when he woke up. He locked her here. His name was Marie. Janet, determined to find answers, contacted a local paranormal researcher who recommended a thing. If you want to survive, call the Warren. They know how to fight what is in that house. The desperate call. That night, under the light of the full moon, Janet marked the number they had given him. The voice on the other side of the phone was calm but firm. "I'm Lorraine Warren. What is happening?" Janet told everything. The house, Matthew's dreams, the marks in the basement, the story of Dr. Halloran. In the end, Lorraine was silent for several seconds. "Let's go there," he said finally. "But prepare. What they have in that house. It is not just any spirit. It is a very old entity. And it is hungry." The connection was cut. At that time, the lobby watch sounded again. But it was not 12 a.m., but 3:33 a.m. The house, once again, had awakened. Chapter 3: First Omens, Dreams and Voices. The house did not sleep, and the Snedeker either. The nights became a succession of endless nightmares, where the boundaries between reality and beyond faded. Janet, desperate, looked for answers in the records of records found in the attic, while Alan fought against an anger that he did not understand. Matthew, meanwhile, was submerged more and more in a world where the dead called him by name. The return of dreams. On the night of April 15th, Matthew woke up screaming. His parents ran to his room and found him trembling, with his eyes open but empty, as if he were in trance. His lips muttered words in an unknown language, a mixture of Latin and guttural sounds that shook Janet. "What are you saying?" asked Alan in a hoarse voice. "I don't know, but it sounds like a prayer," Janet replied, terrified. When Matthew regained consciousness, he remembered anything. He could only describe the feeling of being suspended in the dark, with hooded figures surrounding him. One of them, a woman with black hair and empty eyes, had whispered in her ear, "The patient's blood will open the door. The guard awaits you." The invasion of voices. 2 days later, Janet decided to record the atmosphere of the house with a portable recorder. Since they had contacted the Warren, the noise of the walls, a constant murmur, as if 100 people spoke at the same time, had intensified. In a recording, he heard a voice that had not been there before. It was a female, weak but clear voice. "Don't stay. They won't get alive." The voice identified as Marie Dupont, a young Frenchman who had worked as an assistant to Dr. Halloran at the end of the 19th century. According to historical records, Marie disappeared in 1895 under suspicious circumstances. Subsequent investigations revealed that Halloran had used it in a ritual to invoke an entity called the Guardian. Janet shared the recording with Alan, who refused to listen to her. "I don't want to know more," he said. "This is not real. It cannot be real." But the house made sure that no one could ignore it. The brand in the mirror. On April 20th, Janet was in the bathroom on the second floor, trying to recover a little normality. When looking in the mirror, he saw a man with a gray beard and ancient suit, Dr. Halloran. His face was contorted in a malevolent smile. She was the first. He will be the last. Janet turned, but there was no one. When he looked at the mirror again, he saw written in him, with condensation, the words, "The circle will close." Alan, upon learning, tried to clean the mirror, but the words reappeared every time he tried. Finally, he broke it with a hammer, throwing him into the rear garden. That night, they heard the sound of a laugh from the fireplace, although it was sealed since decades ago. Marie's Diario. While Janet fought against voices and appearances, Matthew became obsessed with finding answers in the basement. Under the autopsy table, he found a hidden compartment on the floor. Inside, a newspaper handwritten in French, written by Marie Dupont. The newspaper described his life at the funeral home, since he arrived in Southington in 1893 as a Halloran assistant. At first, he believed he worked in a medical laboratory, but soon discovered the truth. Halloran performed satanic rituals with fresh bodies, seeking to open a door to a world where the dead controlled the living. In the last entry of the newspaper, dated October 12, 1895, Marie wrote, "Today, the doctor has confessed his plan. He needs a special, pure, and sick blood. A body that is between life and death. He says that he can bring the guardian. I can't flee. The doors are sealed. I think my time has come. I just hope someone one day read this and know the truth." Matthew cried when reading the last words. For the first time, he understood that he was not a casual victim. It was the goal, the arrival of the Warren. On April 23rd, Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived in Connecticut. They brought with them a research team and a Catholic priest to perform a minor exorcism. When crossing the threshold of the house, Lorraine stopped, closed her eyes, and whispered, "This is not a spirit. It is an older something, more hungry." Ed, with his calm characteristic, inspected the basement. When touching the autopsy's table, he felt a chill that tore his entire body. "Here they have practiced dark rituals for more than a century," he said. "And the guardian is still here." Lorraine approached Matthew and looked directly into her eyes. "He has chosen," he murmured. "But there is still hope. The covenant of darkness." That night, the phenomena intensified. The lights blinked without control, and the air smelled like sulfur. Alan, possessed by an unknown force, attacked Ed Warren with a lamp, shouting, "He told me that I would kill them all." Janet managed to reduce it, but Alan did not remember what he had done. The priest, fearful, began to pray in Latin, while Lorraine placed a blessed cross in the center of the lobby. The cross was instantly darkened, as if it had been burned. "It will not work," Lorraine said, in a trembling voice. "The guardian is stronger than any demon we have faced." At that time, Matthew passed out. Upon waking, I had a mark on the chest, a black circle with symbols that shone with red light. "He's marking," he whispered. "He says I'm yours." The truth behind the guardian. After research hours, the Warren discovered a disturbing connection. The guardian was not a common spirit, but an entity that had been invoked by Halloran in 1892 during a ritual that involved blood of innocent victims. According to ancient manuscripts, the guardian was a being that existed out of time, which could manipulate the minds of the living to serve it. "You don't want to destroy them," Lorraine explained. "He wants to recruit them, turn them into part of their army." Revelation froze the family of the family. Not only were they fighting a demon, they were fighting a force that could corrupt their souls. The final decision. The next day, the Warren proposed a solution, a protection rite that included the blessing of all the rooms of the house and the placement of reliquaries in the thresholds. But Lorraine warned that it would not be enough. "We need a sacrifice," he said. "Something that the guardian value." Matthew, in a firm voice, replied, "I'll offer myself. If that stops this, I will." Janet shouted, refusing to accept it, but Matthew insisted. "It's my life or everyone's." The house, as if listening to his decision, trembled. A voice, stronger than ever, resonated in all rooms. "Come to me, Matthew. The circle will close." The final battle was about to start. Chapter 4. The Game of Spirits. The house vibrated with a dark energy, as if every wall, every corner, was loaded with an invisible electricity that oppressed Snedeker's chest. The ceiling lights blinked without apparent reason, and a glacial cold invaded the rooms, even in the middle of April. But the most frightening was not the temperature or the lights, it was silence. A silence that drowned, which seemed to absorb even heartbeat. That night, Ed and Lorraine Warren decided to perform a protection ritual in the basement. They brought with them a series of religious objects, a silver cross, a reliquary with holy land, a rosary consecrated by a bishop, and an ancient Bible. The priest who accompanied them, Father Michael Latanzi, prayed quietly with trembling hands. "We can't allow the guardian to approach Matthew," Lorraine said, placing the cross in the center of the autopsy's table. "But we will be ready," Ed replied, in a firm voice. The ritual begins. The ritual began at 12 a.m. The Snedeker family met in the basement, surrounding the marble table. Lorraine turned on 3 black candles, which went out immediately. He tried to turn them on again, but the flames were extinguished before the wipe came to burn. "He wants us to do this," Janet murmured, looking at his son with eyes full of fear. "It doesn't matter what you want," Ed said. "This will not end until we expel this thing here." Father Latanzi opened the Bible and began to recite Psalm 23. "The Lord is my pastor, I lack nothing. In places of delicate herbs it makes me rest. Next to rest waters it leads me. I cool my soul. By paths of justice I guide me for the love of his name. Although I walk in a valley of shadow of death, I will not fear any bad, because you will be with me. Your rod and your fall will infuse me. Head, my cup overflows." As he read, the air in the basement became denser. The stone walls dripped a black liquid, as if the house was bleeding. Matthew fell to his knees, grabbing his head with his hands. "Hurts. Shout Dash. He says he loves me. Don't let him in," Lorraine shouted, holding the cross tightly. Suddenly, the basement door closed suddenly. The sound was so strong that everyone startled. The ceiling light went out, plunging the space in absolute darkness. But at that time, something began to shine, the brand in Matthew's chest. It was a red, pulsating light as if it had its own life. The guardian's voice. "He is mine." The voice resonated throughout the basement, as if it came from the walls, of the roof, of the floor. It was deep, guttural, as if 100 voices spoke at the same time. Father Latanzi pursued and began to recite traditional exorcism. "In the name of Jesus Christ, King of the universe, go, unclean spirit. Start your henchmen from the body and soul of this child. That the Lord, for his power, breaks your claws and sends you to hell." The house trembled. The ceiling lights came up again, but they were not normal lights. They were red, as if the fire burned behind the bulbs. The symbols in the basement walls, those that Janet had found days ago, began to shine with the same light. "Be responding," Ed shouted, protecting Matthew with his body. "Do not let it touch it." But it was late. Matthew got up slowly, as if he was possessed. His eyes were completely black, without pupils. His voice was not his. "They can't save him. He is already part of me. The circle is complete," Janet shouted, running towards his son, but Alan stopped her. "Don't touch him," said Dash. "It is not him." The sacrifice of the guardian. At that time, Lorraine approached Matthew, without fear. He raised the cross and held it in front of him. "In the name of God, I order you to release it." Matthew folded with pain, as if something inside him struggled to maintain control. His hands became claws, his teeth lengthened, and an inhuman roar came out from his throat. "I will feed on your blood. It will be my door." Suddenly, the basement floor began to open. A crack appeared in the center, where a black smoke emanated that smelled sulfur. The autopsy table disintegrated in seconds, as if it had been consumed by the fire of hell. "Fast," he shouted Ed. "The reliquary." Lorraine took the blessed reliquary and threw it towards the crack. The smoke retreated, but did not disappear. "It's not enough," said Father Latanzi. "We need an offering." Janet, terrified, looked at his son. His eyes were no longer black, but his breathing was irregular. "What kind of offering?" he asked, in a broken voice. "A memory, an object with emotional value, something that the guardian cannot ignore," Ed replied. Janet ran home and returned with a wooden box. Inside, there was a photograph of Matthew as a child, a worn teddy, and a letter he had written when he knew he had cancer. "Take this," he said, throwing the box towards the crack. The smoke absorbed it. The crack closed with a rumble. The ground stopped shaking. The lights returned to normal. Matthew fell to the ground, unconscious. The calm before the storm. During the following days, the house seemed to calm down. There were no more voices or marks on the walls or inexplicable cold. Matthew regained strength, although his gaze was still absent. But the Warren were not convinced. "It's waiting," Lorraine said. "It is not over with you." "What does it mean?" asked Alan. "Revenge. And it will not stop until you have it." The shadow in the mirror. One night, Janet looked in the bathroom mirror. He did not see herself, but Marie Dupont. The young Frenchman was standing behind her with the same chains on the wrists. He will return. And when he does, nobody will survive. Janet turned, but there was no one. The mirror fogged, and a new phrase appeared in it. "The door will not close." The house, once again, had awakened. Chapter 5. The Brand of Death. The house did not rest, neither day nor at night. From the failed ritual in the basement, the atmosphere had become even more oppressive. The walls, formerly wet and cold, now seemed to emanate a sickly heat, as if the house was alive and breathed over the Snedeker. Matthew, whose chest carried the reddish brand of the Guardian, felt more and weaker. His eyes, formerly bright, had lost his light. He walked around the house like a ghost, with his gaze lost in a vacuum, muttering incomprehensible words. The change in Matthew. Janet watched him from the kitchen, where he tried to prepare a soup that nobody would eat. Alan, sitting on the sofa of the living room, stared at the television off, as if waiting for some image to appear on the black screen. Out, the rain fell with an intensity that did not seem natural, as if the sky was crying for them. "How are you doing?" asked Alan without looking up. "Peor," Janet replied, with his voice broken. "It does not speak. Just walk in circles, repeating the same phrase. The door will open." Alan rose slowly and approached the window. Outside, among the trees, he saw a dark figure. It was tall, with an old suit and a glass hat. His eyes shone with a reddish glow like burning embers. "What the devil?" Alan murmured, but when he blinked, the figure had disappeared. The brand is activated. That night, Matthew woke up sweating. His chest burned, as if the brand were alive, as if something inside him tried to leave. He looked in the bathroom mirror and saw how the brand extended, bouncing under its skin as a network of black veins. "What is happening to me?" he whispered, in a trembling voice. Suddenly, the mirror fogged and, slowly, words written in it appeared. "The patient's blood will open the door." Matthew shouted, breaking the mirror with his hands. Blood ran down his fingers, but he didn't feel pain. Instead, he heard a voice in his head, deep and guttural. "It's your destiny. You'll be the key." The discovery of the Halloran newspaper. The next day, Janet decided to check the attic again. I needed answers. In a wooden box, he found a diary he had not seen before. It was written by Dr. Halloran, with a tight and nervous letter. The first page said, "The Guardian is not a spirit. It is an entity that exists outside time. To invoke it, a body between life and death is needed. The blood of the patient is the key. The circle must be completed with 3 sacrifices: the body, the soul, and the will. If it fails, the Guardian will claim everything." Janet closed the newspaper with force. It wasn't a house. It was an altar. A place of sacrifice. And Matthew was the next offering. The invasion of the spirits. That night, the house went crazy. The lights blinked without control, and the mirrors fogged with messages in an unknown language. Alan, in an anger access, tried to burn Halloran's diary, but the flames did not consume it. Instead, the book began to burn with a reddish light, and from it a voice that was not human came out. "He is ours. The circle will close." Janet ran to Matthew's room. He found him levitating on the bed, with his eyes completely black. His body was twisted at impossible angles, as if something inside him tried to escape. "Matthew!" Janet shouted, but the boy did not respond. Suddenly, Matthew jumped, with a malevolent smile on his face. His voice was not his. I am the guardian. And now he belongs to me. The battle for Matthew. The Warren arrived at dawn. Lorraine carried a reliquary with blessed land and a silver cross. Ed, with his usual calm, inspected the house, but the smell of sulfur was so intense that he even felt nausea. This is worse than we thought, Ed said. The guardian is inside him. Then you have to get it, Janet replied, desperately. It's not so simple, Lorraine said. If we take it out without preparation, your soul could break. What if we do nothing? Asked Alan. And the guardian will release. The expulsion ritual. The ritual began in the basement. Lorraine placed the cross in the center of the circle of symbols they had found on the wall. Ed and Father Latanzi surrounded Matthew, who was tied to a chair with blessed ropes. In the name of Jesus Christ, I order you to leave this body, the father recited, in a trembling voice. Matthew shouted, and a black smoke came out from his mouth that filled the basement. The cross shone with a white light, repelling the darkness. But the guardian did not give up. He is mine. The door will open. Suddenly, Matthew freed himself from the strings and threw himself on the father, with his teeth turned into claws. Ed managed to stop him, but Matthew threw him against the wall with a superhuman force. We can't contain it, Lorraine shouted. We need a sacrifice, said the father, in a desperate voice. Janet, without hesitation, took the cross and placed it on Matthew's chest. The brand shone with a red light, and Matthew fell to the ground, unconscious. We've stopped, for now, Lorraine said. The final warning. That night, the house was silent. But in the bathroom mirror a new phrase appeared. The door will not close. Janet, seeing her, knew they hadn't won. They had only bought some time. What do we do now? Asked Alan. Lucar, Janet replied. Because if we lose, we will not only lose Matthew. We will lose our souls. The house once again expected. Patient. Hungry. Chapter 6. Rituals in the dark. The house was not over with them. Although the expulsion ritual seemed to have temporarily stopped the guardian, the tension in the house was palpable. The air smelled of sulfur and moisture, as if the house had been burned inside and only ashes were left. The walls, before covered with hidden symbols, now showed new brands. Human figures with horns, snakes curled around bodies, and a door drawn on the basement wall, as if it were an entrance to another world. Halloran's letter. Janet, desperate to find answers, once again reviewed Dr. Halloran's diary he had found in the attic. This time, he found an attached letter, written with a trembling and hurried letter. Asterisk, who finds this letter? If you're reading this, it means that you have awakened what sleeps under this house. The guardian is not a common spirit. It is an entity that exists outside time, which has been invoked in this place on multiple occasions. To control it, a blood ritual is required. To destroy it, a sacrifice is needed. If you have arrived here, there are only two paths. Either you release it forever or confine it with your own soul. There is no escape. Dr. Henry M. Halloran, 1899. Asterisk. Janet felt a chill to travel his back. The letter not only confirmed its worst suspicions, but also suggested that there was no way to escape. The blood ritual. That night, Matthew woke up screaming. Alan and Janet ran to their room and found him with completely black eyes, muttering words in a language they didn't recognize. His hands were covered with blood, although he had no visible injuries. The patient's blood will open the door, Matthew whispered in a guttural voice. Janet backed away, terrified. Alan, trying to keep calm, took his son by the shoulders and shook him. Detail, Matthew. Return with us. But Matthew did not respond. His eyes were fixed on a point on the wall, as if he were seeing something invisible. Suddenly, he got out of bed and walked towards the door. He is calling me, he said, before lowering the stairs to the basement. Janet and Alan followed him, terrified. In the basement, Matthew stopped in front of the door drawn on the wall and extended his hand. From his palm came a thread of blood that dripped on the ground. At that time, the ceiling lights blinked and turned off. "Don't let him do it," Lorraine shouted, who had returned with Ed Warren. Ed ran to Matthew and held him strongly. "Wake up. He doesn't control you." But Matthew liberated with a superhuman force and threw himself against Ed, throwing him against the wall. Lorraine, with the blessed cross in her hand, tried to approach, but Matthew stopped her with a look. "You will not stop me," he said, with a malevolent smile. Suddenly, the basement's floor began to tremble. The walls cracked, and from the cracks a black smoke came out that smelled sulfur. The door drawn on the wall began to shine with a reddish light. "It's opening the door," Janet shouted. "Fast. We need to stop the ritual," he replied, Ed, getting up. The battle against the Guardian. Lorraine took the cross and approached the door. The reddish light intensified, and suddenly, a heartbreaking cry filled the air. It was the sound of hundreds of souls shouting at the same time. "He comes," Matthew whispered, in an empty voice. The door began to open slowly, revealing a black hole that seemed to absorb light. Ed and Lorraine joined Father Latanzi, who began to pray in Latin. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I order that this door close, that the Guardian be sealed forever in the darkness." But the Guardian was not willing to surrender. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the door. He was a tall man, with a black cape and red eyes. His face was deformed, as if he had been burned. "He is mine," he said, pointing to Matthew. Matthew, possessed, knelt in front of the figure. "I am yours," he replied. Janet shouted, running towards his son, but Alan stopped her. "No! Don't touch it." The figure extended his hand and touched the mark on Matthew's chest. The pain was unbearable. Matthew shouted, falling to the ground. The brand began to shine with a red light, and from it a thread of blood came out that was absorbed by the figure. "You're taking your blood," Janet shouted. "We can't leave it," Lorraine replied. He took the reliquary blessed and threw him towards the figure. The creature shouted with pain, going back. The door began to close slowly. "No," he shouted, Ed, "close the door." Janet and Alan helped Matthew get up, while Lorraine and Father Latanzi prayed with more force. The door closed with a rumble, and the black smoke disappeared. The calm before the storm. During the following days, the house seemed to calm down. There were no more voices, or marks on the walls, or inexplicable cold. Matthew regained strength, although his gaze was still absent. But the Warren were not convinced. "It's waiting," Lorraine said. "It is not over with you." "What does it mean?" asked Alan. "Revenge. And it will not stop until you have it." The shadow in the mirror. One night, Janet looked in the bathroom mirror. He did not see herself, but Marie Dupont. The young Frenchman was standing behind her with the same chains on the wrists. He will return. And when he does, nobody will survive. Janet turned, but there was no one. The mirror fogged, and a new phrase appeared in it. "The door will not close." The house, once again, had awakened. Chapter 7. The Call of Demons. On the night of April 30th, the house went crazy. The walls dripped a dark liquid that smelled like sulfur, and the air was so dense that breathing was an effort. The lights blinked without control, and in each mirror of the house there were new phrases written in blood. "The door will open." "The Guardian's voice becomes unbearable." Matthew woke up screaming. His parents ran to his room, but when they entered, they found him standing, with completely black eyes and a malevolent smile on his face. "He comes," Matthew whispered, with a voice that was not his. Janet tried to approach, but Matthew extended his hand and threw it against the wall with a superhuman force. Alan, terrified, threw himself on his son, but Matthew grabbed his neck and lifted him from the ground with one hand. "They are nothing more than insects," Matthew said, with a voice that sounded like 100 demons spoke at the same time. Alan managed to free himself and ran to look for the Warren. Lorraine, hearing what had happened, took the blessed cross and entered Matthew's room. "Slower away from him. Shout." But Matthew didn't move. He only smiled. Do you think that cross can stop me? Suddenly, the cross began to burn with a reddish light, and Lorraine released her, shouting with pain. No! He shouted Ed, throwing himself to helping her. The demonic invasion. That night, the house was transformed. The walls cracked, and from the cracks a black smoke came out that filled the air with a smell of rot. On the roof, symbols appeared that were not there before. Human figures with horns, snakes curled around corpses, and a door drawn on the wall of the basement that shone with a reddish light. It's opening the door, Janet shouted, terrified. We have to stop this, Alan replied, in a broken voice. At that time, the basement began to tremble. The lights went out, and suddenly, a figure emerged from the drawn door. It was high, with a black cape and red eyes. His face was deformed, as if he had been burned. He is mine, said the figure, pointing to Matthew. Matthew, possessed, knelt in front of the figure. I am yours, he replied. Janet shouted, running towards his son, but Alan stopped her. No! Don't touch it. The figure extended his hand and touched the mark on Matthew's chest. The pain was unbearable. Matthew shouted, falling to the ground. The brand began to shine with a red light, and from it a thread of blood came out that was absorbed by the figure. You're taking your blood, Janet shouted. We can't leave it, Lorraine replied. The protection ritual fails. Ed and Lorraine decided to perform a protection ritual in the basement, hoping to contain the guardian. They gathered everything they had, a blessed cross, a reliquary with sacred land, and an ancient Bible. In the name of Jesus Christ, I order that this evil be sealed, said Father Latanzi, in a trembling voice. The demonic figure laughed. Do you think your words can stop me? Suddenly, the cross broke into 1,000 pieces, and the Bible burned alone. The reliquary darkened, as if it had been contaminated by darkness. Not working, he shouted Ed, terrified. We need something stronger, Lorraine replied. The final sacrifice. Janet, desperate, ran to the attic and returned with a wooden box. Inside, there was a photograph of Matthew as a child, a worn teddy, and a letter he had written when he knew he had cancer. Take this, he said, throwing the box towards the drawn door. The smoke absorbed it. The door closed with a rumble. The ground stopped shaking. Matthew fell to the ground, unconscious. The calm before the storm. During the following days, the house seemed to calm down. There were no more voices or marks on the walls or inexplicable cold. Matthew regained strength, although his gaze was still absent. But the Warren were not convinced. It's waiting, Lorraine said. It is not over with you. What does it mean? Asked Alan. Revenge. And it will not stop until you have it. The shadow in the mirror. One night, Janet looked in the bathroom mirror. He did not see herself, but Marie Dupont. The young Frenchman was standing behind her with the same chains on the wrists. He will return. And when he does, nobody will survive. Janet turned, but there was no one. The mirror fogged, and a new phrase appeared in it. The door will not close. The house, once again, had awakened. Chapter 8. The Invasion. The house awakens. The house roared. It was as if the building itself had come alive. The wooden floor creaks with a force that was not natural, as if thousands of insects crawl below. The walls dripped a black liquid that smelled of rot, and the windows fogged with phrases written in blood. The door will open. The Snedeker, terrified, had taken refuge in the room where Ed and Lorraine Warren tried to keep calm. Father Latanzi, with trembling hands, prayed quietly while Lorraine checked his old notes and documents. We don't have a lot of time, Lorraine said, tense. The Guardian is breaking the barriers between the worlds. If we don't stop it now, not just Matthew will be lost. You will all be consumed. Alan, with red eyes and pale face, looked at his son, who was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands, murmuring words in a language that nobody recognized. What can we do? Janet asked, with a broken voice. We have tried everything. Not everything, Ed replied. There is a ritual. one that no one has tried since 1899. The ritual of blood and spirit. Ed displayed an old map on the table. It was a plan of the house, with annotations in Latin and hidden symbols. This place was built as an altar, he explained. Dr. Halloran designed each room to channel dark energy. The basement is the heart, where the rituals were performed. But there is another place. He pointed out a point on the map, in the cylindrical tower on the northwest side of the house. Here. The tower. It is the place where Halloran invoked the Guardian for the first time. If we want to stop this, we must use that place to seal it. As? Asked Alan. With a ritual of blood and spirit, Lorraine replied. We need an object that has a strong emotional bond with Matthew. And we need a sacrifice. Janet, without hesitation, ran to the attic and returned with a wooden box. Inside was a letter written by Matthew when he was 8 years old, a ring of his grandmother, and a family photography before cancer diagnosis. This is what we have, he said, with tears in his eyes. It's enough, Lorraine said. But we also need something else. That? Asked Alan. Someone must enter the tower and face the Guardian. Not as an exorcism, but as a spiritual duel. A duel, Janet repeated. What are you saying? The Guardian cannot be expelled with blessed sentences or relics, Ed explained. It must be faced directly. Someone must enter there and fight him. Alan got up immediately. I'll do it. No, Lorraine replied. It is not the father who must do it. It is the son. Everyone looked at Matthew, who raised his head. His eyes were not completely black, but they had a reddish shine. He is already connected to the Guardian, Lorraine continued. If someone can face it, it's him. Janet began to cry. No, I will not allow you to use it as a bait. It's not a bait, Lorraine said. It is your only opportunity. The invasion begins. That night, the sky darkened before usual. The wind whipped the trees with a supernatural force, and the rain fell diagonally, as if it were thrown from hell. The family and the Warren climbed the cylindrical tower, carrying Matthew's objects and an ancient Bible. When they opened the door, the air was dense, almost solid. The room was in gloom, with a wooden table in the center, covered with ancient symbols. On the wall, a figure was carved in stone, a demonic face man with horns and a black lair. It's him, Lorraine murmured. The Guardian. Matthew, with a pale face, approached the figure. You're here, he whispered in a guttural voice. Janet shouted, running towards his son, but Ed stopped her. Don't interrupt him. If you do, everything will be lost. Matthew closed his eyes and concentrated. Suddenly, his pupils darkened completely, and the air was filled with the sound of shouts, as if 100 souls called from the hereafter. He comes, Matthew whispered. Suddenly, the room began to tremble. The walls cracked, and black smoke came out from the cracks. The figure carved on the wall began to move, as if it were giving life. No! Lorraine shouted. Don't let it in. Matthew fell to his knees, shouting with pain. His body twisted, as if something inside him was fighting to leave. I am the Guardian, said the figure, with a voice that sounded as if it came from another dimension. He is mine. Janet, desperate, took Matthew's letter and placed it on his chest. Remember who you are. Shout dash. Remember who you are. Matthew opened his eyes. For a moment, they were human again. Mother. Shout dash. It is inside me. Halloran's body. While Matthew fought against the Guardian, the basement's floor began to tremble. Ed and Lorraine went down to investigate. In the basement, the walls dripped blood, and at the autopsy table, a figure began to form. It was Dr. Halloran. He is not the only one who lives here, the figure whispered, with a voice that sounded like torn paper. You can't possess this house again. He shouted Ed, raising the blessed cross. But the figure laughed. This house is mine, and the Guardian is my master. Suddenly, the figure was thrown on Ed, throwing it against the wall. Lorraine tried to stop her, but the figure grabbed her neck and lifted her from the ground. "You can't stop the inevitable," he said. "You're already dead," Lorraine shouted, with the broken voice. "But my work continues." The figure released Lorraine, who fell to the ground, coughing. The final battle. In the tower, Matthew kept fighting. His eyes were completely black and his body was twisted in agony. "Matthew," Janet shouted, "return with us." Suddenly, Matthew jumped up and walked to the figure of the Guardian. "I am yours," he whispered. "Well," the Guardian replied, "now we will open the door forever." But then, Matthew stopped. He looked at his mother, his father, the Warren. "No," he said, in a trembling voice. "What are you saying?" The Guardian roared. "I'm not yours," Matthew replied, in a firm voice. The room trembled. The Guardian's figure shouted in pain, and the black smoke began to leave Matthew. "You can't destroy me," the Guardian shouted. "I'm not yours," Matthew repeated. The Guardian's figure vanished. The house once again was silent. The calm after the storm. During the following days, the house seemed to calm down. There were no more voices or marks on the walls or inexplicable cold. Matthew regained strength, although his gaze was still absent. But the Warren were not convinced. "It's not over," Lorraine said. "The Guardian is still here. It has only been injured. How can we be sure that it won't return?" asked Alan. "We can't," Ed replied. "But at least they have one time." Janet, looking at his son, knew that his battle was not over. The house once again expected. Patient. Hungry. Chapter 9. The Warren Judgment. The house did not rest. Neither day nor at night. Although Matthew had managed to resist the Guardian momentarily, the tension in the air was palpable. The Snedeker family, together with the Warren, knew that the demon would not easily give up. The house was an altar of dark power, and the Guardian, an entity that existed out of time, would not allow his work to be undone without a final struggle. The revelation of the lost ritual. Ed and Lorraine Warren reviewed the old documents they had collected during their investigations. In a dusty folder, they found a 19th century report on a similar case in Massachusetts, where a Jesuit priest had made a seal ritual to contain a demonic entity. The report described a complex rite that required 3 elements: an object with a strong emotional bond with the victim, a prayer in ancient language pronounced by a consecrated priest, a symbolic sacrifice, not blood, but of will. This is the only documented method that has worked against entities such as the Guardian, Lorraine explained, with a tense voice. "But the symbolic sacrifice, what does it mean?" Janet asked, fear. "It means that someone should give up something that defines their essence," Ed replied. In the case of Massachusetts, a blind man resigned from his ability to see, and the demon was sealed. Alan looked at Matthew, who was still sitting on the couch, with his eyes lost on the roof. "What would he have to give up?" asked. Lorraine did not respond. "I didn't need to do it." The invocation of trapped spirits. That night, Lorraine decided to contact the spirits trapped in the house. Using his medium-sized gift, he sat in the center of the living room with his hands on an old wooden table. Ed turned on a black candle and an incense of sandalwood, while Father Latanzi prayed in Latin. "To those who live in this place, come and reveal the truth," Lorraine invoked, closing his eyes. The house responded immediately. The lights blinked and a voice arose from the wall. "He will not leave. The Guardian is eternal." Suddenly, the lobby mirror fogged, and a figure appeared in it, Marie Dupont. His face was pale, his eyes full of tears. "He used me. He burned me alive in the tower. His blood is the key. The circle will not close," Janet shouted, running towards the mirror. "How do we stop it?" he asked, despair. "They have to break the ritual. But he will be the price." The figure disappeared. The mirror broke into thousands of pieces. The sealing ritual. The next day, the Warren decided to perform the sealing ritual. They needed the object with emotional bond. Matthew chose the letter that his mother had written when he knew that he had cancer. Next to her, They placed an old Bible, a reliquary with blessed land, and a silver cross. The ritual must be done in the tower, it said. It is where the guardian was first invoked. The family went up to the cylindrical tower, where the figure of the guardian was still carved on the wall. The air smelled like sulfur, and the ground vibrated with an inaudible sound. "He comes," Matthew whispered, in a trembling voice. "Don't let me dominate you," Lorraine warned him. "You are stronger." Father Latanzi opened the Bible and began to recite in Latin. "In nomine Dei Patris Omnipotentis, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, ego invo vos, Spiritus Sancti, ut protectus huncum abad et a potestate tenebrarum." The room trembled. The figure carved on the wall began to move. The guardian, with his burnt face and his red eyes, extended his hand to Matthew. "He is mine," he roared. "It's not yours," Lorraine replied, raising the cross. But the cross darkened and broke, as if the darkness had corrupted it. "The light cannot stop me," the guardian laughed. The battle of wills. Matthew, with the trembling body, approached the figure. "I'm not yours," he said, in a firm voice. "You are. Your blood is the key. The circle will close." Matthew looked at his mother, his father, the Warren. "My life is not yours," he said. The room trembled violently. The guardian shouted, and from his body emanated a black smoke that filled the tower. "No!" Lorraine shouted. "The sacrifice." Matthew took his mother's letter and placed her on her chest, on the guardian's mark. The blood began to leave the brand, but not of a wound, but of its soul. "I am not yours," he repeated, in a broken voice. The brand shone with a white light, and the black smoke dissipated. The guard shouted in pain, and his figure vanished on the wall. "It's not the end," he whispered, before disappearing. The calm after the storm. During the following days, the house seemed to calm down. The walls stopped dripping blood, the mirrors showed no more horrifying phrases, and the air no longer smelled sulfur. Matthew regained strength, although his gaze was still absent. The Warren, however, did not stay. "The guardian is not dead," Lorraine said, before leaving. "It has only been injured." "Will you go again?" asked Alan. "I don't know," Ed replied. "But if you do, don't call anyone else." Go. The shadow of the past. One night, Janet looked in the bathroom mirror. He did not see herself, but Marie Dupont. The young Frenchman was standing behind her with the same chains on the wrists. He will return. And when he does, nobody will survive. Janet turned, but there was no one. The mirror fogged, and a new phrase appeared in it. "The door will not close." The house, once again, had awakened. Chapter 10. Liberation, an end or a new beginning. The house was silent. It was not a normal silence, like that of a quiet night, but an oppressive silence, as if the building itself contained breathing, waiting, observing. The walls, before covered with demonic symbols and blood phrases, were now clean, but they still smelled of moisture and death. The windows, with their red-stained glass windows, reflected the light of the full moon, which shone with an almost unnatural intensity. The Snedeker had gathered in the room, together with the Warren. Father Latanzi, pale and with deep dark circles, held the Bible with trembling hands. "I hadn't slept in days." Ed Warren's face was serious, with an expression that mixed concern and determination. Lorraine, meanwhile, looked at Matthew with a mixture of compassion and fear. "This has to end," Ed said, breaking the silence. "This house cannot remain a portal for that thing." "But we don't know if the guardian is really defeated," Janet replied, in broken voice. "What if you're only waiting?" "If we don't face it now, we won't have another chance," Lorraine said. "The ritual must be done." Alan looked at his son. Matthew was sitting on the couch, with his eyes lost on the roof. His eyes, although humans, had a reddish shine, as if something inside him were fighting to leave. "Are you sure this will work?" asked Alan, in a hoarse voice. "There are no guarantees," Lorraine replied. "But it is our only hope. The ritual of light and darkness." That night, the Snedeker and the Warren descended to the basement. The autopsy table, which had been the heart of Halloran's rituals, was covered with religious objects, a silver cross, a reliquary with blessed land, a Bible of the 17th century, and Matthew's grandmother's ring. "This object has a strong emotional bond with you," Lorraine told Matthew. "Are you willing to sacrifice it?" Matthew nodded. "If that frees me, yes." Father Latanzi, with trembling hands, opened the Bible and began to recite exorcism. "In the name of Jesus Christ, King of the universe, I order that the guardian be expelled from this place. That his claws are broken, that his will be annihilated, and that his essence is sealed forever." At that time, the air became heavy. The ceiling lights blinked and the ground began to tremble. "He is mine," he roared, a voice in the dark. Matthew shouted with pain, falling to the ground. His body was twisted at impossible angles, as if something inside him tried to escape. "Don't let him in," Janet shouted, running towards his son. Alan stopped her. "Don't touch him." "Shout dash. It is not him." The guardian's voice resonated in the basement. "The patient's blood opened the door. The circle will close." Lorraine took the cross and placed it in front of Matthew. The cross shone with a white light, repelling the darkness emanating from the boy. "Get out with us." "Shout dash. You are stronger than him." Matthew opened his eyes. They were completely black. "I am the guardian," he whispered. "Don't let him take control." Ed shouted, throwing the reliquary blessed to the ground. The reliquary opened, and from him a white light came out that filled the basement. The stone walls shone with old symbols, as if the building itself was fighting against darkness. "They can't destroy me," he roared, the guardian's voice. Matthew, with a heartbreaking cry, got up from the ground. His body shook with violence, and from his mouth a thread of black blood came out. "I'm not yours," he shouted, in a broken voice. The ground stopped shaking. The lights returned to normal. The cross stopped shining. Matthew fell to the ground, unconscious. The calm after the storm. During the following days, the house seemed to calm down. There were no more voices or marks on the walls or inexplicable cold. Matthew regained strength, although his gaze was still absent. The Warren decided to stay a few more days to make sure the guardian would not return. Ed checked the basement, the walls, the windows, and found no traces of dark energy. "He seems finished," Ed said, with a tired voice. "At least for now. Do you think he will return?" Janet asked. "I don't know," Lorraine replied. "But if he does, we will not be there to help them." Alan, looking at his son sleeping, whispered, "Do you think Matthew is free?" "I think," Lorraine said, "that the guardian can't control it. But I don't know if it's completely destroyed. The shadow of the past." One night, Janet looked in the bathroom mirror. He did not see herself, but Marie Dupont. The young Frenchman was standing behind her with the same chains on the wrists. "He will return," he whispered. "And when I do, nobody will survive." Janet turned, but there was no one. The mirror fogged, and a new phrase appeared in it. "The door will not close." The house, once again, had awakened. The legacy of the house. Months later, the Snedeker moved from the house. They couldn't sell it, and nobody wanted to rent it. The building was abandoned, with broken windows and the walls covered with graffiti. But in the following years, there were rumors that the house was still active. Neighbors claimed to have heard shouts at night, and in the windows there were shadows of human figures. Paranormal researchers tried to enter, but everyone reported the same thing: a glacial cold, voices on the walls, and a feeling that something watched from the shadows. In 2010, a paranormal research documentary visited the house. In one of the recordings, a voice that said, "He is still here. The guardian will not rest until his circle closes." The open end. The Snedeker family tried to rebuild their lives. Matthew, although free of the guardian, never fully recovered his health. Cancer returned, and the treatment was more aggressive. In 2005, Matthew died. Janet and Alan divorced shortly after. Each one took different paths, but both claimed to have had recurring dreams. Matthew, standing at the house, with a malevolent smile, saying, "The door will not close." The Warren, before their death, wrote in their memoirs, "There were cases that marked us, but none like Southington's house. Some entities do not die. They just sleep. And one day, they will wake up again." The house is still standing. And on its walls, in the dark, something expects. Author's notes. This story is based on testimonies of the Snedeker family, historical documents of the Halloran funeral, and interviews with Ed and Lorraine Warren. The description of the sealing ritual and the appearance of the guardian coincides with other cases investigated by the Warren, including the famous case of Amityville. Matthew's letter was found by later researchers and is considered one of the few historical sources that explain the purpose of the house. The phrases in mirrors are consistent with other cases of paranormal communication and have been analyzed by experts in supernatural phenomena.